be talking about, well, it's really based off this podcast I listen to. It's a pastor called Andy Stanley, and his podcast is called Your Move with Andy Stanley. And the title of this podcast, or this episode, is Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. So I'm going to give kind of a summary of it, but if you want to hear the whole thing, which I highly recommend, go to the podcast app or wherever and listen to it. So throughout life, we all make a lot of decisions, right? We make decisions every day, like what are we going to wear to work, what are we going to eat for lunch, what are we going to have for dinner. So many little decisions throughout the day, and then there's a lot of bigger decisions, right? That can really impact our lives. Where are we going to go to college? What school are we going to send our kids to? Should I take this job? Should I not? There's a lot of bigger decisions that impact our life as well. And there's a lot of decisions that we made in our life that I'm sure, like, how many of you guys have made a decision in your life that you regret later on? Like, probably all of us have made a decision that we regret. And, a lot of the time we try to avoid those regretful decisions. But I think the reason, when Andy Stanley talks about in the podcast, the reason we make a lot of these bad decisions is, the person that is most likely to deceive you, the person that's most likely to persuade you is the person that you're looking at in the mirror. So you're the best, you're the best at deceiving yourself. You're the best at persuading yourself to do things. Like, for example, like when I see something I want, maybe it's like a new fishing rod or like a new paddleboard or something. I have it in my mind. I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm like, oh, like you make up all the excuses, like, oh yeah, I have the money to do that, or I can do so many cool things with it, or your mind's constantly persuading you, like telling yourself things to like get you to make the purchase or do the thing that you want to, you may think is good, but ultimately it could affect your bank account, could affect like other areas of your life. So the person that you're looking at in the mirror is the person that can deceive you the most. And that's, that can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? A lot of times, because our heart is sinful, because we're naturally sinful people, our heart tries to deceive us to do a lot of, bad things, or things that we know we shouldn't do, but we still want to do it because it feels good, or it gives us satisfaction, whatever, you fill in the blank. And because we're constantly deceiving ourselves, we're constantly telling ourselves these lies in order to justify our actions, that makes it really hard to lead ourselves in order to accomplish our goals. Because think about, if you're a leader, you're leading someone. If this person's constantly lying and cheating, like, it's really hard to lead that person, right? So that's why it's like, it can be really hard to lead our own selves, because we're constantly, like, our heart's telling us to do the thing that's more comfortable, maybe the thing that's not as challenging, but those things ultimately aren't getting us to where, like, the goals we have set in place. Like for me, I'm studying for this big test for work in November, and I hate to study. I don't like to sit there and study. So naturally, I'm gonna tell myself, oh, I can procrastinate a little bit here and there. I can, play video games or go fishing instead of studying, whatever. But ultimately, that's not going to get me to where I want to go, the ultimate goal, right? So Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" That question at the end, who can understand our heart? We know ourselves better than anyone, but we still can't control our heart all the time. We still can't understand it. But the person who can is God, right? He knows our hearts better than we do ourselves. He knows our sinful nature. He knows what we're truly longing for. And ultimately, if you have a relationship with God, your heart is longing for His love. Your heart is longing for His peace, right? So ultimately, our hearts are going to deceive us. It's our own fault that we deceive ourselves, we lie to ourselves to tell us what we think is right. But ultimately, we need to rely on God to come into our hearts and guide us through life, right? So, 2 things that, kind of like a challenge. If you don't know, if you haven't accepted God into your heart, I encourage you to, talk with me about that now, or if you have any questions about that, I'd love to talk with you about it. And also, take time, maybe tonight, maybe another day, just take time in your life to just look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what things are you telling yourself to deceive you? Kind of bring you down. What excuses are you making to yourself that are holding you back from the ultimate goals that you need to accomplish? Or, what's keeping you from having a greater relationship with God? Be honest with yourself about, maybe some of the lies that you're telling yourself or whatnot. I know I definitely need to do that in my life. But those are just the encouragement I have for you today. So let's pray. Dear God, I thank you for this time. Thank you for that you know our hearts, Lord. You know everything about us, God. And I pray that we can just trust in you, Lord, accept you into our hearts, and just live a life that glorifies you, God. And that we can be honest with ourselves and each other. Pray that we have a good rest of the night, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.